Hi guys, welcome back to Christy's Book Corner. I'm your host, Christy Mason, and today's chapters are from Inkheart, are chapter 33 and 34. So this video is going to be 33, next video is going to be 34. Chapter 33, Capricorn's Maid. Dustfinger set out when the night could grow no darker. The sky was overcast with not a single star shining. Only the moon showed occasionally between the clouds, as thin as a slice of lemon. Dustfinger was glad of such darkness, but the boy jumped whenever a twig brushed his face. For heaven's sake, I should have left you with the marten after all. Dustfinger snapped as Farade clutched his arm in fright yet again. You'll give us away with your teeth chattering like that. Look ahead of you. That's what ought to scare you. Guns, not ghosts. Before them, only a little way off now, lay Capricorn's village. The new floodlights poured light as bright as day over the gray houses. And they say this electricity of theirs is a blessing, whispered Dustfinger as they skirted the parking lot area. That's a weird word. A bored-looking guard was strolling around along the parked vehicles. Yawning, he leaned against the truck, which Cockrell had used to bring the goats back that afternoon, and put on a pair of headphones. Excellent. An army could march up now and he wouldn't hear it, muttered Dustfinger. If Basta were here, he'd discipline the man for that. Shut him up in Capricorn's cowsheds for 3 days with nothing to eat. Why don't we go over the rooftops? After all, fear had gone from Farade's face. The guard with his shotgun didn't alarm the boy half as much as his imaginary ghosts. Dustfinger could only shake his head over such foolishness. But the rooftop idea wasn't stupid. A vine that hadn't been pruned for years grew up one of the houses besides the parking lot. As soon as the guard wandered out over to the other side of the area, swaying in time to the music that was filling his ears, Dustfinger climbed up his wooded branches. The boy climbed even better than he did, and proudly offered him a hand once he was up at the roof. They moved only sleathily, like stray cats, past chimneys, aerials, and Capricorn's floodlights, which were angling downward and left everything behind them in the cover of darkness. Once a shingle came loose under Dustfinger's boots, but he managed to catch it just in time before the terracotta tile could fall and break in the street below. When they reached the square, there where the couch in Capricorn's house stood, they let themselves down from a gutter. For a few breathless moments, Dustfinger ducked behind a stack of empty fruit crates, looking out for guards. Both the square itself and the narrow alley to one side of Capricorn's house were bathed in light. A black cat was sitting on the edge of the well outside the church. Basta's heart would probably have missed a beat at the sight of it, but Dustfinger was much more concerned about the guards outside Capricorn's house. 2 of them were lounging by the entrance. It was one of these, a small, sturdy man, who had found Dustfinger 4 years ago in a town up in the north, just as he was about to give his last show. He and 2 companions had dragged the fire eater back here, where Capricorn had, in his own characteristic way, questioned him about Silvertongue in the book. The 2 guards were arguing, and as they were so absorbed, Dustfinger plucked up his courage, took a few rapid steps, and disappeared down the alley beside Capricorn's house. Farid followed him, as soundless as his own shadow come to life. Capricorn's house was a large, bulky building which might once have been the village hall, a discussed monastery, or a school. All the windows were dark, and there were no other guards to be seen in the alley. But Dustfinger remained watchful. He knew the guards liked to lurk in the dark doorways, invisible as ravens at night in their black suits. Indeed, Dustfinger knew almost everything about Capricorn's village. He had walked these streets often enough since Capricorn brought him here to look for silver-tongue in the book. Whenever he felt the sharp pangs of homesickness, he had come back here to his old enemies, where he didn't feel quite so out of place. Even his fear of Basta's knife couldn't keep him away. Dustfinger picked up a flat stone, beckoned Farid to his side, and threw the stone down the alley. Nothing moved. As he had hoped, the guard was doing his rounds. Dustfinger hurried to the high wall behind which Capricorn's garden lay, vegetable beds, fruit trees, and herbs, protected by the wall from the cold wind that sometimes blew from the nearby mountains. Dustfinger had often entertained the maids as they hoed the beds, and there were no floodlights in the garden, no guards either, who steal vegetables, and only a door with a grating over it, a door that was locked at night, led from the yard into the house. The dog kennels lay beyond the wall, too, but when Dustfinger swung himself up and over the way were empty. The dogs had not come back from the hills. They'd shown more sense than Dustfinger expected. And Basta obviously hadn't gotten new dogs yet. Stupid of him, stupid Basta. Dustfinger signaled the boy to follow him and stole past the carefully tended beds until he had reached the back door with the grating. The boy looked at him questioningly when he saw the solid bars, but Dustfinger should lay a finger in his lips and looked at just laid a finger to his lips and looked at one of the windows on the second floor. The shutters, black as night, were open. Dustfinger moved in so lifelike a fashion like that several cats answered, but nothing moved behind the window. Dustfinger cursed under his breath, listened to the sounds of the night for a moment, then pressed close to the wall of the house. This time, and immediately, the shrill cry of a bird of prey. Furry jumped and pressed close to the wall of the house. This time, something didn't move behind the upstairs window. A woman leaned out of it. When Dustfinger waved to her, she waved back and quickly disappeared. "Don't look like that," whispered Dustfinger, seeing Farid's anxious glance. "We can trust her." Quite a few of the women aren't too fond of Capricorn and his men. Many of them didn't even come here of their own free will, but they're all afraid of him, afraid they'll lose their jobs, afraid he'll burn the roofs off the heads of their families if they talk about what goes on here, or perhaps send Basta to call on them with his knife. Risa doesn't have to worry about that kind of thing. She has no family, none anymore, he added to himself silently. The door behind the grating opened, and Risa, anxiously faced appeared behind the bars, and looked pale beneath her dark blonde hair. "How are you?" Dustfinger went over to the grating and put his hand through the bars. Smiling, Risa pressed it and nodded at the boy. "This is Farid." Dustfinger lowered his voice. "You could say he's adopted me, but you can trust him. He doesn't care for Capricorn any more than we do. Risa nodded, looked at him reproachfully and shook her head. Yes, I know it wasn't sensible to come back. You heard what happened. Dustfinger couldn't prevent something like pride from creeping into his voice. They thought I'd put up with anything, but they were wrong. There's still one copy of the book left, and I'm going to get my hands on it. Don't look at me like that. Do you know where Capricorn keeps it? Risa shook her head. There was a rustling behind them, and Dustfinger spun around, but it was only a mouse scurrying over the quiet yard. Risa took a pencil and a piece of paper out of her dressing gown pocket. She wrote slowly and neatly, knowing that Dustfinger found it easier to read capital letters. She had taught him to read and write so they could communicate with one another. As usual, it took some time for the letters to make sense to Dustfinger. He felt a fresh sense of pride every time those symbols finally fit together into words, and he could get their secret out of them. I'll look around, he had read softly. Good, but be careful. I don't want you risking your pretty neck. He bent over the paper again. But do you mean the magpie has Basta's keys now? He gave her the note back. Farid watched Risa, writing as spellbound as if he were watching someone work magic. I think you'll have to teach him too, Dustfinger whispered through the bars. See how he's staring at you? Risa looked up and smiled at Farid. Awkwardly, he looked away. Risa passed her fingers around her face. You think he's a nice boy? Dustfinger twisted his mouth in a teasing smile, while Farid felt so embarrassed he didn't know where to look. Well, what about me? Beautiful as the moon, am I? What am I to make of that as a compliment? You mean I have almost as many craters? Risa pressed her hand over her lips. It was easy to amuse her. She laughed like a young girl. That was the only time you could hear her voice. Shouts rang out in the night. Risa clung to the bars, and Farid, terrified, crouched down at the foot of the wall. Dustfinger pulled him to his feet again. It's nothing, he whispered. Just the guards taking post shots at cats. They always do that when they're bored. The boy looked at him with disbelief, but Risa went on writing. She took the keys away to punish him. Dustfinger read. Basta won't like that at all. The way he acted with those keys, you'd have thought he would looking after Capricorn's most prized treasured possession. Risa mimed, taking a knife from her belt, looking so grim that Dustfinger almost laughed out loud. He quickly glanced around, but the yard was silent as the grave between its high walls. Oh yes, I can well imagine that Basta's furious, he whispered. In that mood, he'll do anything to please Capricorn. Slit throats, gash open faces, anything. Risa reached for the paper again, and once more it took him a painful long time to decipher her clear, neat writing. Oh, so you've heard about Silvertongue. You want to know who he is? Well, but for me, he'd still be locked up in Capricorn's sheds. What else? Ask Farid. Silvertongue plucked the boy out of his own story, too, like a ripe apple. Luckily, he didn't bring out any of the gulls that boy keeps carrying on about. He reads aloud very well indeed, much better than Darius. As you can see, Farid doesn't limp. His face probably always looked the way it does now, and he still has his voice too, even if you might not think so at the moment. Farid cast him an angry glance. What does his silver tongue look like? Well, I can at least tell you that Basta hasn't decorated his face yet. A shutter creaked above them. Dustfinger pressed close to the grating. Only the wind, he thought. Nothing but the wind. Farid was staring at him, eyes wide with fear. No doubt the creaking sounded to him like a demon, but the figure who leaned out of the window above them was a creature of flesh and blood. Mortola, or the magpie, as she was secretly nicknamed. She was in charge of all the maids and nothing was safe when Magpie's eyes and ears, not even the secrets the women whispered to each other in their bedrooms by night. Even Capricorn's strong boxes had better accommodations than his maidservants. They all slept in his house, 4 to a bedroom, crammed in like sardines. The Magpie leaned over the windsill and breathed into the cool night air. She stayed there for what seemed to be endless time, so long that Dustfinger could happily have wrung her neck, but finally she appeared to have filled every inch of her body with fresh air and closed the window. I must go, but I'll be back tomorrow evening. Maybe I'll have found out something about the book by then. Dustfinger squeezed Reese's hand. Her fingers were rough from laundry work and cleaning. I know I have said it before, but all the same, be careful and keep away from Basta. Reese shrugged her shoulders. How else could she respond to such unnecessary advice? Almost all the women in the village kept away from Basta. But he didn't keep away from them. Dustfinger waited outside the grating until Reese was back in her room. She signed to him. She signaled to him through the window with a candle. The guard in the parking lot still had his headphones on. Deep in his own thoughts, he was dancing among the cars, shotgun in his outstretched arms as if he were dancing with a girl. By the time he finally looked their way, the night had already swallowed up Dustfingers and Farid. They met no one on the way back to their hiding place. Only a fox who slunk away with the hunger in his eyes. Gwyn was eating a bird inside the walls of the burned-out cottage. Its feathers were shadows in the darkness. Has she always been mute? Asked the boy as Dustfinger laid down under the trees to sleep. As long as I've known her, replied Dustfinger, turning his back to the boy. Farid lay down beside him. He had made this his habit from the first, and however often Dustfinger moved away, the boy was always close beside him. When he woke up, the photograph in your backpack, he said. It is her. So? The boy did not reply. If you've taken a fancy to her, Dustfinger mocked him, forget it. She's one of Capricorn's favorite maids. She's even allowed to take him in his breakfast and help him get dressed. How long has she been with him? 5 years, said Dustfinger. And in all that time, Capricorn has never once let her leave the village. She can't even go out of the house very often. She ran away twice, but she never got far. One of those times a snake bit her. She never told me how Capricorn punished her, but I know she never tried to run away again. There was a rustling behind them. Farid jumped, but it was only Gwyn. The marten was licking his muzzle as he leaped and landed on the boy's stomach. Laughing, Farid plucked a feather out of his fur. Gwyn snuffled around the boy's chin and busily around the boy's chin and nose, as if he had missed him. Then he disappeared into the night again. He really is a nice marten, whispered Farid. No, he's not, said Dustfinger, pulling his thin blanket up to his chin. He probably likes you because you smell like a girl. Farid's only answer was a long silence. She looks like her, he said at last, just as Dustfinger was dropping off to sleep. Silvertongue's daughter, I mean. She has the same mouth and the same eyes, and she laughs in the same way. Nonsense, said Dustfinger. There's not the slightest resemblance. They only have blue eyes, that's all. It's not unusual here. Hurry up and go to sleep. The boy obeyed. He wrapped himself in the sweater that Dustfinger had given him, and turned his back to his companion. Soon he was breathing as peacefully as a baby, but Dustfinger lay awake all night, staring at the stars. That's it for Chapter 33. Stay tuned for Chapter 34. Please subscribe, comment, and like to be notified when I upload another video. Hit the notifications bell, and I'll see you in my next video. Not Stay Classy. That's Maze Ford Gaming. Dare to Dream.